It's just a folder. You're so dramatic. That was my brother's voice, lazy and unbothered, standing in the doorway of my home office while 2 years of my life disappeared from a progress bar on his screen. My name is Daniel Reed, and that was the moment I understood something I should have figured out a long time ago. Some people will never respect what they can't see, and my brother had never once tried to see anything I built. Let me back up. I'm a software developer. Have been since I was 19, grinding through community college, teaching myself at night, freelancing for coffee money while my brother cruised through a business degree our father paid for in full. By the time I was 28, I had one real asset to my name. Not a car, not a house, not savings. An app. 2 years of nights and weekends poured into a logistics platform I'd been quietly building for mid-size freight companies. Nothing flashy, nothing that would make sense to anyone at Thanksgiving dinner. But I had 3 pilot clients, real contracts, and a pitch meeting scheduled with a venture capital firm out of Austin called Bridgepoint Capital. The kind of meeting you get once if you're lucky. I called it FreightSync. My brother called it my little computer thing. The trouble started because of a shared house. When our grandmother passed 18 months ago, she left behind a 3-bedroom property in Phoenix that she split between me, my brother, and our parents. None of us could afford to buy the others out immediately, so by family agreement, we kept it in joint ownership while we figured out the next step. My brother moved in to manage it since he was in between jobs, which in his language meant permanently between jobs. I visited on weekends sometimes, and kept a home office set up in the back bedroom. It was easier than renting workspace, and for a long time, it was fine. The desktop in that back office was mine. Custom built, every component chosen and paid for by me. My brother knew this. My parents knew this. I had even put a label on the tower that said, in clear black letters, Daniel's machine do not use. I thought that was enough. I genuinely believed a label and a family agreement would protect what I had built. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. I drove out to Phoenix on a Thursday because my pitch was the following Monday morning and I needed a full weekend of prep. When I walked into the back office, my brother was sitting at my desk, using my machine, eating chips over my keyboard. He had a browser open with 12 tabs, a movie streaming in the corner, and my development environment running in the background doing something I didn't immediately recognize. I asked him what he was doing. He waved a hand without looking at me. My laptop's charging. Yours was just sitting here. I looked at the screen more carefully. He had opened my external project folder, the one labeled FreightSync, Master, and was apparently trying to move files around to make room because he decided to use my desktop as storage for his own downloads. While reorganizing, he had highlighted a large portion of my source directory and hit delete without reading what it was. The recycle bin had been emptied. He'd done that too, apparently, because it was slowing down the machine. I stood there reading the file path of what was gone. 2 years. The full build. Every iteration, every client customization, the pitch deck, the financial model, the live demo environment. Gone. I asked him, very quietly, if he understood what he had just deleted. He turned around then and looked at the screen. His expression didn't change much. He shrugged. Can't you just re-download it or something? Isn't that what the cloud is for? That was the moment. Not rage, not screaming. Just a cold, clarifying stillness. I told him those were source files. Not downloaded content. Code I had written. Configurations I had spent months calibrating. You cannot re-download something you created. It doesn't exist anywhere else. He blinked. Then he said the thing I will never forget for the rest of my life. Honestly, Daniel, it's just a folder. You act like you're the only person in the world with problems. I've been dealing with stuff too, you know. You're so dramatic. Then he turned back to the screen and went back to his movie. I walked out of the room. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say another word. I went to the kitchen, filled a glass of water, and stood at the sink for about 4 minutes just breathing. My hands were completely steady, which surprised me. I felt the kind of calm that only comes after something has already been decided. I heard my brother call from the back room. Hey, do you want to order pizza? I was thinking we could watch something tonight. I didn't answer. I texted my father. Told him what happened. His response came within 2 minutes. He's been under a lot of stress. You know how he is. Can you work around it? I texted my mother. She called immediately, voice warm and practiced, the tone she used when she wanted to smooth something over before it became a real conversation. Honey, your brother didn't mean anything by it. He doesn't understand all the technical stuff. You can rebuild it, right? You're so good at this. I set my phone face down on the counter. Here is what neither of them knew. What my brother didn't know, what my co-developer back in Austin didn't know, what nobody knew except me. 2 years ago, when I first started taking FreightSync seriously, I bought a small NAS device, a network-attached storage unit, about the size of a hardback book. I tucked it behind the water heater in the utility closet of that back bedroom, hardwired it to the router, and set it to run a silent, automatic mirror backup of my development drive every 6 hours. I had done this after a hard drive failure cost me 3 months of work on a previous project. I never mentioned it to anyone because I never needed to. It was just a habit, like locking the door. That NAS had been sitting behind the water heater for 22 months, quietly copying everything, completely invisible to anyone who didn't know to look. I went to the utility closet, crouched down, and checked the indicator light. Green. Last sync 4 hours ago. Everything was there. Every single file. I stood up slowly and allowed myself one small exhale. Then I went back to the kitchen, poured the rest of my water down the drain, and started thinking about what came next. Because here is the thing about a moment like that. The files being recoverable didn't mean nothing had happened. Something had happened. My brother had walked into my space, used my property without permission, destroyed something irreplaceable without remorse, and when confronted, told me I was being dramatic. My father had asked me to work around it. My mother had told me I could just rebuild. Not one person had said sorry. I had been in that position before. The quiet one, the dependable one, the one who fixed things and asked for nothing and never made it uncomfortable. I paid for the property taxes on the Phoenix house 3 times when the family account ran short. I lent my brother money twice in the past year, money he paid back in excuses. I had driven 4 hours round trip to help my parents move furniture because my brother was busy. I was always available, always useful, always there. And now I was dramatic. I didn't sleep much that Thursday night. Not because I was panicking. The files were safe. I wasn't panicking. I was thinking, there is a difference between the anger that makes you shout and the kind that makes you quiet and organized. I had the second kind. By Friday morning, I had a clear picture of what I needed to do, in what order, and why. The first thing I did was recover every file from the NAS onto a brand new encrypted drive I bought at a Best Buy 30 minutes after it opened. I verified every directory, every build configuration, every document. Intact. I loaded the full pitch environment onto my laptop and ran the demo 3 times. Flawless. I was ready for Monday. The second thing I did was call a real estate attorney. Here is what my family didn't know, or more accurately, what they'd never bothered to understand about the Phoenix house. Because my brother was living there and managing it, there was an informal agreement that when we sold, which we'd been loosely discussing for months, he would receive a slightly larger share to compensate for the inconvenience of being on site. Nothing in writing. A handshake arrangement floated at a dinner 6 months ago that everyone nodded along with. My brother was counting on that money. He'd mentioned it more than once. It was going to help him get back on his feet, start something new, finally get moving. He talked about it like it was already in his bank account. I had a 1/3 ownership stake in that property, recorded clearly in the probate transfer from our grandmother's estate. No addendums, no modifications, no written agreements about adjusted splits. The handshake arrangement was exactly that, a handshake. The attorney confirmed what I needed to know. As a co-owner, I had the right to petition for a partition sale, a legal process that forces the sale of jointly owned property when co-owners can't agree on its disposition. It wasn't aggressive or unusual. It was simply property law. I asked her to begin preparing the paperwork. I also called the property management company my father had been vaguely talking about bringing in to handle a potential rental of the house instead of selling. I introduced myself as a co-owner and let them know the rental conversation was off the table from my end. They noted it. I spent Friday afternoon and Saturday preparing for my pitch. I was focused in a way I hadn't been in months. There's something clarifying about removing noise from your life. The background hum of obligation and management and careful behavior that I had always maintained around my family, it was gone. I wasn't performing for anyone. I was just working. Sunday morning, my brother knocked on the office door. He came in looking like he wanted to say something important, which usually meant he wanted something. He leaned against the doorframe and told me he'd been thinking. He said he felt bad about the computer thing. He said he guessed it was probably stressful with my meeting coming up. I waited to hear an apology. He said, "So, are we good?" I looked at him. I said, "Sure." He looked relieved. Then he asked if I could spot him $300 until the end of the month. He had a thing he needed to take care of. I told him I didn't have it available right now. He blinked. "You just said you were good." I said being good with someone and lending them money are different things. Then I turned back to my laptop. He stood there for a moment. Then he left. Monday morning, I drove to Austin, parked 2 blocks from the Bridgepoint Capital office building, sat in my car for 10 minutes, and just breathed. Then I walked in with a flash drive, a laptop, and 2 years of work that almost no longer existed. The meeting room had floor-to-ceiling windows and 4 people around a glass table. I recognized 2 of them from the firm's website. The lead partner, a woman named Christine, had passed on an earlier version of my pitch 14 months ago. She remembered. She mentioned it in the first 2 minutes. "We've seen a version of this before," she said. "Walk us through what's changed." So I did. The demo ran perfectly. The freight routing algorithm I'd spent 4 months refining showed a 23% reduction in delivery overhead for one of my pilot clients, with documented results. The financials were tight. The market analysis was current. By the time I walked through the expansion roadmap, the energy in the room had shifted. People were leaning forward. Someone had stopped typing and was just listening. Christine asked me why I hadn't closed a round sooner. I told her the product wasn't ready sooner. I wanted the numbers to be real before I asked anyone for real money. She nodded slowly. That was apparently the right answer. By early afternoon I had a term sheet in my hands. $2.8 million in seed funding. Not the biggest number in the world. Enough to hire, to scale, to move from 3 pilot clients to 30. Enough to change everything. I sat in my car again afterward. No music, no calls. Just the afternoon quiet and the weight of a signed document on the passenger seat. I thought about Thursday night, about standing at the sink with a glass of water, while my brother watched a movie in the room where he'd just erased 2 years of my life. I thought about my father's text and my mother's phone call. I thought about how ordinary it had all felt to them. Nothing about this moment felt ordinary to me. I drove back to Phoenix that evening because there were still things I needed to handle in person. When I arrived at the house, my brother was in the living room. My parents were there too, apparently visiting for dinner. This was not planned from my end, but it saved me a second trip. I sat down at the kitchen table and I asked all 3 of them to come in and sit down. My father came in first, hands in pockets, already looking slightly defensive the way he did whenever he sensed a serious conversation. My mother came in wiping her hands on a dish towel. My brother dropped into a chair and picked up his phone. I told them I wanted to update them on 2 things. The first was the pitch. I told them it had gone well. I had secured funding for FreightSync and would be moving forward. My mother smiled and said that was wonderful. My father nodded. My brother looked up briefly from his phone and said nice, then looked back down. I told him to put the phone away for a minute. He looked up, mildly annoyed. What? I said I wanted him to understand the full picture. The folder he deleted on Thursday was worth $2.8 million. It was almost not recoverable. I had a backup he didn't know about, which was the only reason I was having this conversation with a term sheet instead of a canceled meeting. I wanted him to understand the actual scale of what he'd treated as an inconvenience. The room went quiet. My mother started to say something about how it all worked out though, right? And I told her I wasn't finished. The second thing, I said, was the house. I let them know I had retained an attorney and initiated the paperwork for a partition action on the property. This meant a court-supervised sale at market value, proceeds divided strictly by ownership percentage as recorded in the estate transfer. 1/3 each to me, my brother, and our parents jointly. My brother put his phone down. I looked at him. The informal agreement about an adjusted split was never documented. I had no legal obligation to honor it, and given the events of Thursday and the responses I received from both him and our parents, I had decided not to. He stood up. That money, he said, his voice going tight. That was the plan. You knew that was the plan. I told him plans without paperwork are just conversations. He looked at our father. Dad, you were there. You agreed to that. My father looked uncomfortable. He said we'd all agreed. I told my father that an agreement between family members that exists only as a memory is not an enforceable contract. I said this without anger. I said it the way you state a fact about the weather. My brother's voice rose. You're doing this because of the computer thing. I told him I was doing this because of everything. The computer thing, the loan he hadn't paid back. The years of being treated like a resource rather than a person. The fact that when he deleted my work his first instinct was to call me dramatic and ask about pizza. I told him I was done arranging my choices around his comfort. My mother started crying. Not loudly, just that quiet leaking that she used when she wanted someone to stop the conversation. My father put his hand on the table. Daniel, he said, we're family. I said I knew that. I also said knowing that didn't require me to absorb unlimited damage and keep smiling. I stood up, picked up my keys, and told them the attorney would be in touch with next steps. I told my brother he should probably start looking at other housing options since the partition process would move at the court's timeline, not ours, but it typically resolved within 6 to 9 months. He said something sharp and ugly as I walked toward the door. I didn't respond to it. I kept walking. I drove to a hotel and sat on the edge of the bed with my laptop open and the term sheet beside me. I ordered room service. Ate slowly. Read through the Bridgepoint agreement one more time without interruption. My phone had about 14 messages across the family group chat. I turned the notifications off and finished my meal. The next few weeks moved fast. I signed the final funding agreement, officially incorporated the company in Texas, and started the process of hiring 2 junior developers I'd already been talking to for months. I found an apartment in Austin, small and clean with good light and no noise. I paid my first month and security deposit with the first tranche of funding and stood in the empty living room for about 5 minutes just listening to the silence. My brother called 3 times in the first week. I let them all go to voicemail. In the messages he swung between anger and something that sounded almost like pleading. He talked about fairness, about family loyalty, about how I was letting a misunderstanding destroy everything. He didn't once say he was sorry for Thursday. Not in any message, not in any text. The closest he came was saying he guessed maybe he should have asked before using the computer. I noted the difference between I should have asked and I'm sorry. They don't mean the same thing. My father sent 2 emails in formal language, which meant he was serious. He outlined his understanding of the original house agreement and argued that a gentleman's arrangement should carry moral weight even without documentation. He said that pursuing a partition action was an aggressive legal move that would damage the family's trust in me permanently. I wrote back one sentence. I said I was more concerned with damage that had already occurred than damage that might occur from addressing it. He didn't respond. My mother texted me a week later, separate from the group chat. Her message was different from the others. She didn't argue about the house or the money. She said she lay awake thinking about what I'd said, about never being told sorry. She said she didn't realize how often they'd expected me to absorb things without complaint. She said she wasn't sure she'd been fair to me and that she was sorry. I read that message 3 times. I texted back and told her I appreciated her saying that. I told her it meant something. I also told her it didn't change the house situation, but that I wasn't trying to hurt her, and that I hoped we could find a way to maintain a real relationship that didn't require me to accept treatment I wouldn't accept from anyone else. She replied with one word. Okay. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. The partition action moved through the court schedule. My brother retained a local attorney who sent a letter arguing that the informal agreement constituted an oral contract. My attorney reviewed it and was politely dismissive. There was no documentation, no witnesses who could verify specific terms, no recorded consideration. Courts don't tend to look kindly on undocumented oral agreements when one party disputes them and the property title is unambiguous. 6 months after I filed, the Phoenix house sold at market value to a couple relocating from California. The proceeds were divided strictly by the estate's ownership records. My share went directly into my company's operating account. My brother received exactly 1/3, no adjustment, no premium for having lived there. It was, by all legal measures, completely fair. He did not speak to me at the closing. He signed where the notary indicated and left without looking at me. I didn't try to catch his eye. There was nothing left to perform for each other. I want to be precise about something because I think it matters. I didn't do any of this out of cruelty. I didn't do it because I wanted my brother to suffer or my parents to struggle. I did it because I had spent years making myself smaller, more flexible, more accommodating, so that the people around me could remain comfortable. And when the cost of that accommodation reached its limit, when my brother sat in my chair and deleted my work and called me dramatic, I made a decision that I was not going to negotiate from fear anymore. There is a version of this story where I recover the files, take a breath, forgive everyone, and go back to being useful and quiet. That version probably ends with another loan I don't see again, another deleted folder, another dinner where I hold my tongue while someone explains to me that I'm overreacting. I chose a different version. FreightSync onboarded its first paid enterprise client 4 months after the funding closed. Not a pilot. Not a trial. A full contract. A regional freight carrier based in Tennessee with 42 trucks and a logistics nightmare I spent 2 weeks untangling. When we got the signed agreement, I was sitting in my Austin apartment at 11 at night eating cold Thai food. I stared at the email for about 30 seconds. Then I closed the laptop and went to bed. The day the press release went out, a brief announcement about the funding round and the company's formal launch. My LinkedIn inbox was busy for about a week. Old professors, former colleagues, a guy I'd built a website for in 2018 who wanted to catch up. I replied to most of them, kept the conversation short and moved on. 3 messages came from family. My mother, first, short and warm, saying she was proud of me and that she meant it. My father, measured but genuine, acknowledging the company sounded serious and wishing me success. My brother, last, after 2 days of silence. His message was a single line. Must be nice, it said. I didn't respond to that one. I think about Thursday night sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. I think about standing in the utility closet with the indicator light showing green and feeling the exact sensation of the floor becoming solid again under my feet. 2 years of work, alive, because of a habit I'd formed after a loss that happened long before any of this. The NAS behind the water heater that nobody knew about. The quiet discipline of protecting yourself before you need the protection. Nobody saved me in that moment. Not my family, not a coincidence. Not luck in any real sense. A decision I'd made 2 years earlier saved me. That's the part I keep returning to. There are people in your life who will always underestimate what you've built because they didn't watch you build it. They see the result without the years. They see the laptop, not the code inside it. They see the folder, not the 2 years contained in the directory. And when something happens to that folder, when it gets deleted or broken or dismissed, their first instinct is to wonder why you're making such a big deal out of it. Those people are not your partners. They're not your collaborators. At best, they're bystanders. And at worst, they're liabilities you've been managing, so carefully you forgot to notice the management was costing you something real. I don't hate my brother. I genuinely don't. I think he's someone who never learned to take other people's work seriously because nobody ever required him to. That's a failure of formation, not a moral catastrophe. But understanding the reason for something doesn't mean you're obligated to keep absorbing its consequences. I have an office now in Austin. 3 employees. A 4th starting in the spring. The Tennessee client just referred us to 2 of their industry contacts and I have 2 more calls next week. I wake up early most mornings and work before the city gets loud, coffee at my desk, building something that belongs completely to me. I don't pay anyone else's bills. I don't cover anyone else's rent. I don't drive 4 hours to move furniture for people who will call me dramatic the next time I'm inconvenienced. I have exactly 1 label on the door of my office. It doesn't say my name. It just says the company name, clean and simple, visible from the hallway. Nobody will mistake it for something they're allowed to use without asking. My name is Daniel Reed. I built something real. And the only thing it took to protect it was deciding, once and completely, that I was worth protecting.